All right, so we're recording now. So tonight we've got Jim Tivy from Bluestream, and he's going to tell us all about some cool new stuff that they're doing with terminology and also just ideas in general using DITA and terminology. So thank you for volunteering to speak to us tonight, Jim, and I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Scott. Um, yeah, I'll cruise along here. It looks like I've got some GoToMeeting console, so I should see, um, hopefully, if anyone puts a chat in. But if I'm not responding, yeah, just ask questions as we go through. This can kind of be a more informal presentation. Um, I'm not entirely nervous, not looking over a sea of 50 people, and so I think we can relax and just take it along.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll interrupt you if I see some questions in the chat window. So don't worry about watching it yourself. Um,
Perfect.
Whatever
Okay.
works for you, but
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So I'll just go ahead here, and we the sort of the lead in is uh, probably about a year, actually maybe a year and a half ago. We undertook to add extended metadata capability to our product. And so we prototyped a product that did ontologies, and that didn't work out. And at the same time, we solicited our customers, and we we said, well, what's your idea of a taxonomy? Well, from one of our large customers, we got they sent us this Thesaurus, and they said, this is our idea of an ontology, or of a taxonomy, actually. And so we said, wow, we didn't really expect to get a Thesaurus. Like, why are you sending us this? And so that was the way they saw the solution to oh, I'm gonna change here, but that's the way they saw the solution to. Sorry, I changed my color scheme, and now it's just not showing me anything. Hold on a second here. And in doubt, Alt Tab. This is going to be fun. So that's what so then I thought, well, okay, Thesaurus. Thesaurus has to do with, terms, and I thought, well, actually terms are important, and, we use words all the time. Um, that's what we're doing. We're creating content out of language. And so we continued to pursue metadata, but extended metadata. But what we decided is we would also ship a thesaurus on top of that. Um, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is sort of some of the motivation for why you would go with a thesaurus or thesauri, and what people are doing um, with thesauri, what some of the standards are, how it fits into DITA, and just some ideas of how you use the thesaurus once you've created it, and in the end, how you manage it. So content and terminology, writers write content and learners acquire knowledge. Learners perform tasks. And so in this case, the idea is learners are essentially your readers. They learn from your content, and then they have to perform tasks on some software product or hardware product or what have you. So that's the initial premise. Organizing terminology then is about organizing knowledge for writers and learners. So it's both for writers and for learners, because the writers are busy organizing the knowledge so that it's coherent, and then they pass that over to the learners, and the learners again, use that terminology and the rest of the content to organize the knowledge. So the first thing that we actually did was we called everything a term, but in the end we discovered that actually the modern way of thinking about terms is that they are short labels for concepts. And so we'll proceed with that definition. That seems to be what the two major standards are saying. And there are some problems with trying to pretend that language doesn't carry its own baggage that kind of dilutes pure concepts. But anyway, the idea is that concepts are what's in your head. So if you think of a stop sign, or the idea of stop, whether it's called stop or arrête or some other form of the concept stop, it means the same thing. And so that's why the thesauri have gone concept-oriented. Anyway, there's other debates on that, because you're really getting into how people think, and like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis says that people think in words, and obviously it goes on and on. It's an open topic. So the idea is, if you use your terminology correctly, you'll get high fidelity. You'll get thought transmission. The old joke of, do what I thought, not what I said. So I'll skip my joke here on the difference between complete and finished. And maybe if there's time at the end, someone wants to hear a joke, I'll tell it. Anyway, so this diagram here kind of sets the context for content creators and content users. And so you've got your SMEs, and you've got product details and support input and product user roles, and content. You've got a content creation team, and you pour all those in, and you get some product documentation. If you publish the content, you can get some sort of knowledge base, or it could be a PDF or an HTML. And then that's used by support, the original, product manufacturer support. It's used by the product user, and the product user, of course, uses the product to get their job done, and they use the knowledge base to help them do that. Thesaurus and terminology. So thesauri is a kind of taxonomy. It's a hierarchy of concepts. The hierarchy uses a narrower and broader relationship for child and parent, respectively. Concepts are controlled and organized. So controlled is like a controlled vocabulary. Organized is referred to the fact that you can organize them hierarchically. Concepts have labels. Some labels are preferred. Some labels are synonyms, and there can be labels for each language. So you could actually have a thesaurus entry that had, ENUS, could be stop, and FRFR could be arrête. And so you get away with one concept and two labels. There's quite a few examples of thesauri. There's ones used by the atomic energy industry. There's terminology used in biomedical here's one online that I found that is the Getty Center, which is an art museum. And here's an example of some thesaurus that they have developed. I'll just go into this one here and search for the term oil. And we get almond oil, which when you click on almond oil, you can see the hierarchical position of that concept under essential oil, all the way under materials facet materials. This is probably some form of oil that's used in creating art or talking about art. There's a definition: colorless or pale yellow, bland and nearly odorless, non-drying fatty oil used as an emulant. So you can see that you know, the idea, if you're writing about art or whatever, you're writing about some procedure, and you say almond oil, then everyone kind of knows what you mean. And so, I wonder if this one, yeah, so you get the idea that there are online thesauri, and there's actually a lot of people that are just using it for just a straight language control. They don't try to bind it into the content at all. Okay. What I have to do is get out of that. So, but what we decided was, well, we're a content management system, and we're a CCMS, and we're managing these components. And we've got all the original text. So what we should do is, instead of just creating a thesaurus that people can look things up in a nice hierarchy, we should create a thesaurus index. And our distinction here is a thesauri is just the hierarchical list of concepts, whereas a thesaurus index includes the links to the topics that have to do with that particular concept. Here's an example. This was taken by a thesaurus for higher education, and they had a term, Higher Education Institute. There's an alternative label, Polytechnique. Definition: institute at the tertiary level of education, excluding universities and academies. Obviously, they need these kinds of terms when they're talking about the subject of education, or no one knows what you're talking about. This actually is a SCOS example, and SCOS is one of the leading standards right now for thesauri. And this is one entry. And then you can see that the parent is educational institution, and the narrower is college of education. Okay, so standard technology, this is a little bit of a survey and that we did, and also kind of explains what we chose. We took as kind of a base technology OWL2, which is really a formalization on top of RDF, or in a sense where they've established some sort of first-class schema objects. And so we decided, well, again, as I said, we needed a general model for extended metadata, so we chose OWL2 as our general model. So Scott, can you still hear me? I just always wonder if the internet's gone down.
Anybody's still there? Yes. Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Right. Good.
Yeah, it's always fun.
So I don't have to go back 5 slides.
No. It's always fun talking in a room all by yourself and hoping that there's actually somebody there.
Yeah, it's almost poetic.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so anyway, we chose OWL2 as a base model, and it was interesting. We kind of we liked SCOS, but we missed the fine print of SCOS. There were two standards, and we read the earlier one. But in the end, we also chose SCOS as our Thesaurus entry representation. And because it's based on OWL2, and so, or it's based on OWL, and OWL2 is an upwardly compatible form of OWL. So we just simply restated the SCOS schema in OWL2, and we got SCOS. The other standard is ISO 25964-1, which is Thesauri for information retrieval. It's the other leading standard. So there's two leading standards for what a thesaurus should be. An interoperable thesaurus. I think SCOTS really is more interoperable because it's XML based and it's W3C based, but there is an ISO standard. So OWL, the simple idea is you have a class of individuals, such as person. So an individual person might be George or Sue. And then George has a certain relationship to Sue, and it's a married relationship. And this particular relationship is bidirectional. Sue's also married to George. George has a wife, Sue. Sue has husband, George. So that's one sort of little expression to comply to the OWL2 data model. So it's quite a simple data model. And, for those familiar with triples, the triple here is George married to Sue. So George is the object, married to is the property or relationship, and Sue is George is the subject, married is the property, and Sue is the object. So, or if you like sentences, object, object sort of property or verb, and subject, property, or verb, and object. So it's something we really are familiar with, these kinds of statements. So that's so when you come to a CMS, the individuals, you have file individuals. So an example of a file individual is washing.xml. You can also have, if you have a thesaurus, you also have concept. You have a class of individuals called concept. And an example of that would be maintenance. And then you could say that washing is about the concept maintenance, which is, actually it's not bidirectional, it's single directional. This arrow shouldn't be there. So that's your triple there. And then here's your two classes in what would be called classes in OWL. So OWL2 has really these four kinds of interesting things. It has individuals, which are just identifiable things in this world. It has classes, which is just categories of individuals, allows us to kind of bind like individuals together and get ourselves into all kinds of trouble as well. It has properties, and properties in OWL2 are really just, they're like relationships, relationships for hire. And an object property is a relationship, so married to. Obviously, that's probably going to be good for persons. You've got data properties, which are sort of more descriptive, you know, and then examples are married and about concept. So then you get property assertion. Property assertion is when you state a fact about, it's a triple. So you've got a subject, a property, and an object. George married to Sue. An example of a data property is George is years old, 45. You know, this is a bit of a clumsy expression here, but you get the idea. The reason 45 is not an individual is it's not, it doesn't itself have properties. It is its own identity. 45 is 45. So 45 doesn't have a name other than 45. So it's the same as, you know, hair color could be also just a data property, whereas individuals are things that may have other properties. Anyway, so washing is about concept maintenance. Okay, so if we're using L2 and we're using SCOS, how are these things expressed? Well, this is, you know, a little bit of a peek under the hood. You never have to look at this XML, but the purpose of this slide is to show that a SCOS information can be interchanged in XML. So because you're using a standard and it's based on another standard, then there's an XML that allows you to exchange information about, now let's see what this does. So the first thing it does is it declares, I so declare that there is a concept called concept with identity phone. And so one thing about OWL is it uses universal identity, which is sort of like a URL. And then they shorten the URL with these prefixes because we hate, you know, reading HTTP, Bluestream.com or whatever. So this is just a prefix. And this thing after the prefix is really just an identifier. In this case, it's readable. But anyway, we so declare that an individual exists, and then we say, well, hey, that individual, the next thing we do is we assert that that individual is a concept. So we're asserting it's a class concept. So now we've got the individual put into its class, and then the third thing we do is we say that individual has a preferred label of the word phone. So you've got, so you can see the literal is phone. So it's really a bit XML-ish, but that's one way to express SCOS and one way to set up a concept in XML. Fortunately, we don't have to type that in. So moving right along, we have DITA technology, which is really, I think, what we're primarily interested in, because it's where we live with our content. And now DITA stepped up to the plate, and they said, we're going to have a term tag, and we're going to have glossary entries that define terms, and we're going to have you know, a key def capability to so that you don't have to type the term every time it occurs. You can just refer to it, and you can also get, you know, pop-up definitions and things like that. So this is considered a best practice, is to use a term tag in your topic, but not to type the term in, but to use a key ref to a key, which the key being defined in your map as perhaps a glossary ref, and then that refers to the glossary entry. So GE voicemail.xml is actually contained by this gloss entry, read this stuff between the gloss entry begin and end tags. And so if we look at the gloss entry, you've got a gloss term, which is voicemail, a gloss definition, and then you can have synonyms, gloss synonym, and gloss usage, and you can also have other alternative tags for this. So that's what we have with DITA. And really, if you look in the DITA spec, it actually says, well, this is great. You can actually use this for terminology databases. So that's sort of at the root of what we did. Now I have some subject scheme slides, just two of them, because the thing is, when we looked at DITA, we thought, well, sure, it's got this idea of term and glossary, beautiful, but it's also got an idea of subject scheme. So where did the two differ? What's the difference between a taxonomy and a thesaurus? So this is just a side mention that you can have a subject scheme, which is really a taxonomy, but it's not really a thesaurus because it doesn't deal with terms. It deals with subjects. So this is what a subject scheme looks like. And the difference between a subject and a term is open to debate, but you just don't have the same power with a subject scheme when it comes to managing terms as you do with term and glossary ref. Now, when we looked at, then we said, well, okay, that's fine. You got rid of subject scheme. You took subject scheme out of the discussion of thesaurus anyway. What about index term? So index term, well, hey, is cheese a term? We're sure interested in it. I mean, we're putting it into the index. So on index term, it was, and the nice thing about index term is you don't have to use it in line either. So we sort of thought, well, index term could be a source of your thesaurus. And example of the final index at the bottom here, where you have cheese, goat's milk, chèvre, and you've got page 14. Well, you've actually got a full index here because you've got a word and a location, basically a link to the location. So depending on what you're using the thesaurus for, you may want to incorporate index terms as well as terms. Or you may want to reconcile your use of index terms and terms. As well, you've got prologue metadata, which is somewhat weak, except here you see there's an index term again. You don't have any of this ability to refer with a key ref. Actually, someone could correct me. I'm not absolutely sure that you can't use a key ref in index term, but I haven't seen it. But it's, again, voicemail could be a term or could be a concept in your thesaurus. And I'll constantly use the word term and then use the word concept. So because we do know these things by their English words, their English preferred labels. So it's just so much more clumsy to talk about it by saying concept with preferred level. So, or sorry, concept with preferred label. So I'll just say term a lot of times, though term is an evil thing. We're supposed to be talking about concepts here. Okay, so the browse, so let's talk about use cases for the author for Thesaurus. One, and we're talking about content creators here. So one use case is that you may want to browse for like topics. Show me all the topics that are about the term, picture or whatever your terms may be. So it's a quick browse method. And just like a taxonomy for the content creators is a quick browse method. For end readers, they may want to use facets to browse. So I'll kind of have an example that shows those. So let's have a look at content creators in XDocs here. The content creators experience. So when you start, this is the XDocs Explorer, which is the sort of content navigation. It's the main tool that the author uses on their desktop to author content, and then it's just connected via HTTP to a server somewhere. So when you start up XDocs, you can go into browse, and so what we decided, well, folder is just one way to browse. So you can see that you have a drop down here of different ways you can browse. So if I want to browse using the Thesaurus, I can browse using the Thesaurus. If I want to look at all the topics that have to do with music, I can click on music and it will show me all those topics. I can say, well, that's fine, but it's kind of a toy example. Let's say I have 5,000 topics, and I want to look at all the topics that are in the demo project, and also are about music. So what I can do is I can create another facet for the browse here, and then I can dial in Thesaurus, and when I press any one of these, it's going to AND the two together. Well, we can see that I didn't get anything back because what I need to do is say the demo folder and all its children. So there's a flat mode here that will show me include all the topics in demo. Otherwise, I could have gone here, which is where the actual topics are. So you're getting an ending. So really, that's what a facet is. It's show me something that combines this and that. As well, you can have other browsers, so you can keep a couple of browsers going at a time if you're browsing globally. So that's the idea of browse, and then you say, well, geez, that's music. Maybe I don't know what that means. So you can toggle on the properties, and it's a kind of a lame definition here, but we can obviously do better. So down here you have all the properties for this particular concept. So really it's, what does wireless mean? You can have other properties such as related. You can have related concepts. So you can say camera is related to handset. Concept basically, well, headset's related to itself. So it allows you to browse through some of the information. But, the question here is, well, okay, where did this Thesaurus come from? And why do I, do I really want to tag? Because over here we have a property window, which is, you can toggle on and off. It's toggled on. And I can sit here and I can, let's say I get rid of this facet and I want to look at all the files in this project are in this folder here, and I want to, set these two to, be talking about music, I guess, right? Have a quick look at it. Say, okay, that's about music, and so I can now set that. You say, well, geez, that's fine, but how do I know those are about music? So the other thing you can do is you can add a heading with any sort of heading that you want to add. So about concept, and I want to show the pref label. I could show the definition as well, and I want the heading to be concept. Okay. So now I sort of get a little bit of feedback as to what my classifications are, and but still, do I really want to go through and set all this? So for some sorts of things you might. So let's get back to where we were here. So examples of facets in a reader or a knowledge base, you can see that with so we just kind of looked at facet browsing in XDocs and how the author or anyone else in the content creation team might want to find like topics and codify them. With an export format, we can export that information and re-import it into a knowledge base or such. But I don't have a demo of that. So I'm just going to show how facets are used in, let's say I want to apply this. Just it's getting tired of this virtual business. So you can see these are typically called facets, and they are in a category. If you click them all on, they're kind of ordered together, but across categories they're ANDed. So if I just want to fly Alaska Airlines, then this is Alaskan Airlines, and I just want economy. Then these are ANDed together. So they're typically considered facets because they're a facet is kind of an independent property of what you're looking at, which is flights. So the number of stops is a facet of flights, and the cabin or the cabiness, yeah, I thought they used to call that class, but maybe that's a dirty word. But anyway, that's another facet, and then the airline is another facet. So that's just a simple example of facets. And they're quite powerful for simple, searches and then refinements of searches. And, so you could obviously use your Thesaurus information for a facet as well. Okay. So then there's managing the Thesaurus. So the first example I showed there was really a manual approach. I set those, I set these two, I set listen to music to headset and music. No, it was one of these JPEGs. I set these two JPEGs to music, and then later on, if I click on music, then I get those two JPEGs. So I did have to code it by hand, but once it was coded, then I can always find it using a facet browse here. We call this multifaceted browse, which is because you can add additional facets as such. So that's fine, but I had to set it and maintain it. And what happens if that JPEG stops being about that? Or maybe a JPEG, is less likely to change its nature, but an XML file could change its nature and no longer be about a particular concept. So there is a better way, and so instead of doing manual, you could harvest. And really with DITA's rich glossary information, I would recommend harvesting, because you're going to maintain the terminology in the actual content inside. So you might as well harvest and manage your concepts and your concept links. So you can see that, I call it managing concepts and then managing concept links. So managing concepts is really just managing the controlled vocabulary or the controlled list of concepts that you allow, because, people can use illegal concepts, or they can use things that you've decided are synonyms and you don't want them used. Or you do want them used and you're going to designate them as synonyms. Or they are using something that's not an allowed synonym. So that's managing concepts. The other aspect is managing the concept links. So as we said, there is a link from the concept to the file. So for instance, if I click on music, what it reflects is that this file, if you go over to the concept column here, this file has music. It is about the concept, music. So essentially what you've got is you've got a link from music.jpg to the music concept. And the hidden triple is the about concept, which is actually the part of the definition of this column uses about concept. It follows the word concept ref label. So that's a concept link. And so, yeah, you want to harvest the concept links too, because you painstakingly put them into terms or index terms, and so why should you maintain these things by hand? So there's obviously a consistency question between the Thesaurus index and the repository, and how synchronized they are. The usual call that I would recommend is you either make your content the source, or you make ad hoc entry your source, but you don't try to merge the two. Okay, so that gets us into a demo here.
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. When you say harvesting concept links, something that came to mind was, are you saying that perhaps you could generate relationship tables or other types of linking from these relationships without actually creating relationship tables?
Yeah, I think that, relationship tables are relationships between topics. You can also you can use subject schemes with relationship tables as well. But the general exploration here, because we're kind of all explorers on this, is that if you have a individual called a concept, it's a little bit unfortunate that they chose the name concept and we have concept topics, but just forget about that for a minute. I'm talking about the Thesaurus concept, or term, if I can use that. So if you have terms, terms are kind of first-class things. And the way DITA expresses first-class terms is in its gloss entries. So that's where terms hang out, and that's where they're defined. So you could form a relationship between where the glossary entry is stored, and you could put that into a relationship table and relate it to some topic with the glossary entry. But it's not really worth doing that because there's sort of a defined term gloss ref, gloss entry mechanism in DITA defined for that purpose. So if you want to relate a term to a glossary entry, a gloss entry, you do it with that slide I showed.
Yeah.
It had the three, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm
Yeah.
thinking more that you'd be able to relate to multiple topics that that themselves potentially are related to similar terms. So rather than hard coding a relationship table, going through and linking topics together, you could potentially like either generate or dynamically create a relationship table like thing from, based on topics relationships to terms.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and I've seen that done before, even by using simple keyword.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone basically keywords up 5 topics. They put a keyword in 5 topics called phone or whatever, and then what they do is you've got some knowledge base and somebody gets to one of those topics. And so instead of creating a relationship table, you know that the other ones all refer to phone. So then what you do is you say, do you want to see all the other ones that are classified by phone?
Right.
And then how you accomplish that, if you have a thesaurus index like we have, it's instantaneous to get there. And so the decoration of those topics, if you're in a knowledge base, you don't necessarily have to rely on DITA to do the decoration of the links. You can just put the related topics at the bottom, when you render the page in the knowledge base. So yes, you're right. You can. That's a good technique.
All right. Yeah.
Um,
No. Just
yeah.
kind of came to mind when you were going through that. Seems like it could be
Yeah.
more efficient.
There's quite a few. Yeah. I mean, the main idea that there's just I was looking at before, but anyway, this is the recommended data way to establish the relationship between uh, an embedded term and a topic and the term itself. And really, in a sense, what we're doing is we're building an index. So if you don't want to maintain these by hands, then you go in and you go harvest, and you say, geez, inside this phones project, I want to harvest all the terms or concepts. And so you browse down, and typically what you want to do is you want to go to a publication. So you go to a DITA map. And so you go down here to, let's say this is the parent DITA map for the entire project. And then you'll say, geez, I want to harvest glossary entries, terms, and index entries. That leads to a bit of a pig pen. Sometimes because you get spacing problems and so on and so forth, right? And you want to go in and fix all those. So at some point, this sort of harvesting can be used to fix things up. What we're going to do is we're going to be strict. So we're going to use glossary entries as our sole list of concepts, because that's really the DITA best practice, is that If you've got terms, put them in a glossary entry. Now, as I said, you may decide that your best practice at your shop is to include index entries because you think index entries are important too. And they may, there may be no terms for everything that's in an index because you decided your glossary wasn't going to include everything for whatever reason. But anyway, I'll use glossary entries. So it's gone, it's crawled all the content and given me back, well, basically giving you all the glossary entries in this project. So you can say, and then it said, well, headset and voicemail are already existing, so I'm not going to do anything. But for earphones, charger, dual band, touchscreen, I'm going to add those as new concepts. So there's 9 of them. So now it puts them into the thesaurus, it puts them into an unclassified portion of the tree, meaning, we can't be smart enough to organize these into any kind of hierarchy. That's kind of a human activity. So if you want to organize them, then you can go into the administrative. You can go into the administrator, CMadmin, we call it in XDocs, and then I'll probably have to refresh because I just harvested a bunch of stuff. And I have to log on because it's been more than half an hour. So we go in here and we look at the thesaurus. So we see all of these terms under unclassified. So we might want to, I'm going to do it under phones new, is I'm going to start organizing these. So I create an accessories tab, and then I put charger under accessories, and I put headphones under accessories, and not under charger though, and so on. And so when you do that, and you come back here, and you see that you're starting to get a bit of a tree that you can build out with these harvested concepts. So that's harvesting concepts, but if I click on these, there's nobody who's about those. There's no files that are about that because I haven't harvested the concept links. So I go back in, and harvesting the concepts is important because this is your kind of controlled list or controlled vocabulary. And then now we come back in and we browse in again, find this DITA map that controls the project. And now we're harvesting concept links. So we can search for terms and index entries. I think I'm just going to search for terms. So it goes through, and now we're getting these concept links, which is really a relationship between a concept and a file. And then we show the definition that sort of helps you remember. It's a definition for the concept. So these are existing concepts, and we found links. And when I say we found a link, really what we found is we found one of these topic tags. We found an embedded reference to the concept in a file, in a topic file. And so that constitutes a link from a file to a concept. So it's a concept link. It's common now that people are using the word link to refer to relationships between a subject and an object. So obviously link is a common term that we all know and love in the internet. So people just are starting to talk about links. So we call them concept links. Okay, so so I do want to keep those concept links, and we have, so now if I start browsing, and this little symbol means include that thesaurus term and all its children. And so that's my quick way of browsing. So now I can see that I actually have a link from earphones to listen to music. And you can see that it's there, listen to music and earphones. So really this forms a nice index that was harvested from the underlying content and can now be used for browsing, and can also be used for other things. If I turn on the properties, I can see I have a nice definition that's also been harvested. You know, a pair of small loudspeakers. It's an interesting definition. So really, this is this thesaurus or thesaurus index that we're looking at here allows you to quickly browse to topics that are about particular concepts. Okay. So, all right. So there are a couple of things I just mentioned, and then probably going over here, I didn't set a hard time here, but when we're in this CMadmin, things are sort of thought of in terms of there's a thesaurus, which is a tree, but if you actually just want to look at the concept individuals as a flat list, you can do that as well. And then obviously there's other kinds of individuals too. There's a part individual, which I haven't populated. You can define new classes of individuals down here. So that gets into the whole extended metadata. So you can carry any kind of attribute about content that you want. Concept was just one example. And concept is supported a little better because it's got a tree. But this is a general purpose kind of metadata capability. And as such, you can also go here and you say, well, geez, I don't want this hierarchical view today. You can just say, show me the about concept facet, and it'll give you an alphabetical view. For sometimes if you have a lot of terms, you could have 1,000 terms or 500 terms. An alphabetical list is more useful if you're not familiar with the tree. The tree representation. So that's pretty well it for the presentation on terminology, and I didn't really get into other aspects of XDocs related to the terminology, but I think you get the idea. I mean, you can obviously search for terms as well, and build searches. So with that, I think I'll wrap it up and go to questions.
Well, I think the first question was, what was your joke from the earlier slide?
Ah, there you go. You're not gonna let me off that one. Okay, so the we were talking about words, and so if you think about the words complete and finished, you think, well, geez, those are like similar meanings, right? Complete and finished, especially if we're in workflow and we're trying to finish a task. We're completed or we're finished the task. But it turns out that if you marry the wrong woman, you're finished. If you marry the right woman, you're complete or completed. And then if you mess around while you're married, you're completely finished. So that's the joke.
All right. Well, thank you.
So that
Couldn't let you go without. You know.
yeah, yeah. No, actually, I really like that joke.
Yeah. So
I agree.
I'm gonna unmute everybody. A couple people had to drop off, but just wanted to open things up to any other questions.
No, this is different. This is some micro strategy stuff, some reporting related stuff that we have to do. We had some allocation time for it, but then it became.
Sorry, I can't quite hear. Am I supposed to be hearing?
No, I couldn't hear much either. Can you try again? I think that was Andrew.
This one?
Hi, Andrew.
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, was it
Oh,
Gary?
okay.
Gary, was that
Not
you?
unless it was me coughing. I'm sorry.
No problem. Huh. All right.
That's okay.
Well,
Any questions or?
yeah, I just want to say thanks, Jim, for doing this, for walking this through. It's very interesting.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I really just the whole idea. I mean, this kind of opens up the concept of really leveraging metadata um, in DITA files. I mean, you've really nailed down this one particular area, but I think um, DITA files are rich with all kinds of semantic tagging and other kinds of metadata that really is seldom used. I mean, people put a lot of effort into just identifying topics as a certain type, and then they, identify elements within those topics as certain types of elements, and you really seldom see the benefit of that other than maybe in some formatting. But I think if you could extract some of that information and like harvest it and identify it and really potentially allow richer searching and different types of linking, I think it really could open up, make the content much more rich and usable. So
Yeah, I think I sort of agree, and I mean we've also looked at harvesting other information if people use other tags, and so that's why I included the
hmm
category tags or the keyword tags. As well, you could harvest control metadata like audience, and say, well, where show me everywhere that I restrict content. I have content that's excluded for audience XYZ. So there's definitely possibilities there as well. So yeah, it is a general. It is a sort of a general framework, and I think in the end, what we realized is we were really in this example, we're really, the main value we bring is that of being an index, a very fast index for browsing. And the other value that we saw was as a management tool, because we're going through all the content. And so if you see a particular file is categorized according to something, and you say, well, listen to music has nothing to do with earphones. Well, of course it does, but if you found, when you're going through your terms, that you found something that wasn't about what it said it was, then you can quickly, dual band maybe has nothing to do with this. You can quickly launch an editor and bring up an editor and then basically change it and then reharvest. So it's a management tool as well, because it gives you an overview of everything you've done with respect to term concept links. So the use of the term tag.
Yeah, presumably,
So,
I guess you could even use it to identify, who's working on what content, and maybe even date ranges of when files are, ready. I mean, that probably overlaps with workflow and other kinds of mechanisms.
yeah, definitely. There's a build out in terms of what can be added to this list,
Yeah,
because these are the facets. So we only have 4 of them in there right now, and we haven't really filled any part information out. But the future build out is, of course, to include other, anything that's available in search. We sort of have a general purpose search technology that you can define your own. You can define your own queries. And so if you did want to know, like right now, if you want to check date range, you say maps by date range, and where create date is greater than start, and create date is less than end. You run that query, and no, I guess it's not going to run that one. But I think we've changed that. I think we've changed this name. File name. What is that name? Let me see if I can get it working. Validate. Yeah, so if you want to run this query, and fill in a date range, you can do that. And if you want to combine that with terms and so on. So what we did is we broke metadata into 3 layers. The first layer is the built-in metadata, which is really what this query is working off of. And so the built-in metadata, and let's say we want to actually see the create date, we allow you to configure the query so that you can see exactly what you want when you run it. So you can fill in your columns, and that's the same thing we're doing over on Browse. So, but you can see that you can access this base metadata, like create date. We're maintaining that day to day every time we create a version. So that's base metadata, but then there's this additional kind of metadata called extended metadata, which is what you see in these facets, besides folder. Of course, folder is built in, but Thesaurus is really all about concepts, and it's the concepts in a tree about concept, or you can have about concept, or you can have about part, or you can have any other, 300 attributes that make sense to your organization, but we didn't ship with that capability because it doesn't make sense with everybody. So you can add that capability and configure it and search on it and tag by it and so on using here. And then the third kind of metadata is just clearly an XML search. So in that case, we just use an XPath expression in the search language. So and so that's that's kind of where you don't really have a controlled vocabulary in that case. It's really just, hey, show me what's in the XML. So you go into your search and you define an XPath expression. I'm not sure I have an example of that because that's a new feature. Yeah, I don't. I have one of basically doing a term search, which is really what I showed, but instead of, you can see that you're doing it more in a search orientation here than in a facet browse. But yeah, so the third type of metadata is sort of the metadata that's not extended. It's not maintained by the system, but it's in the XML. So you can do XPath queries on that, but the problem there is, you know, if you want to create a nice index where you click on a tree, then it's better to sort of harvest it into an extended metadata capability. So there's a number of ways to get around in the system. You can save these searches and so on. So, but you know, for ease of use, you know, sometimes it's better to just extract things into an index. Or sometimes there is nothing in the content. There is no part identifiers in the content. So in which case, then you're back to, you know, codifying your content to have all the parts. You know that, you know, this stuff is about, you know, part such and such codifying. So yeah, that's kind of where we're going.
Yeah.
That's kind of goes beyond the terminology stuff.
Is this in XDocs 3.5 or is this something in 4.0?
Yeah, this is 4.0. So
okay.
the two things in 4.0 are this more enhanced browse capability. I mean, we used to have a folder pane, and that was how we thought of browse. But now browse is really thought of as, you know, find a facet and browse, and if you want to combine facets, combine facets. And then the other feature is a sort of a process-oriented workflow. And so that's, you know, you define processes ahead of time, and you've got state transitions and claiming. Because our previous workflow was more single task based. So now you kind of have flow-based workflow.
Cool.
And yeah, so that's coming out in, I would say, a couple of months. We should have a release. We're just doing feature complete on that right now. So.
Well, that looks really cool. Well, Andrew or Gary, any questions?
No, thanks again.
All right. And I think Gary's muted himself because he's got a cold. He says it looks very interesting now in the chat window. So, well, yeah, no, I really appreciate you, you know, talking to us about the terminology issues and, you know, showing us what's going on in next version of XDocs. It looks really exciting.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, you guys have a good evening, what's left of it. And we'll see you guys around.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Yeah,
right.
no
Good night.
problem.
We'll
Yeah, good night, Andrew.
talk to you guys all later. All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.